Welcome back to True Story with John Gibson. Today's episode is one of my favorite active BJJ competitors, Damien Anderson. Damien, thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. I'm really happy to be on the podcast. Thanks for having me.
Of course, hey, totally my pleasure. And again, I appreciate your flexibility today. As I just sort of stated, you're one of like my favorite active competitors, and I haven't actually had an opportunity to meet you, as you know, right? The other folks don't know until this moment. So again, I'm super appreciative you could join me. I hope that most of the questions today aren't just like boring or redundant for you, but I'm a super fan, so I got like probably a lot of generic questions, but I just appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, no problem at all, man. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Awesome. So I want to say, like, I'm sure, like, most of the folks that kind of watch the show and follow the show are they're BJJ fans or MMA fans. So most of them, I'm sure, are going to be familiar with you. But for the very few who probably aren't, man, I just want to kind of self-describe you as like uber dynamic. You're explosive. I love kind of your counter game too. Like, you're not scrambly in a way that you don't know like what you're doing, like frenetic, but you're like very controlled in your inversions and stuff. I just love the complexity, but the smoothness of your game, So kind of with all that being said, I know like high level stuff about your background, like, your DDS, you train with some of the best in the world, but like going back in time, like where did it start, man? Where did you begin the white belt journey?
Yeah, so the white belt journey actually started in college when I was studying at Rutgers. I had just happened to come across the Rutgers BJJ club. My friends had told me about it, and I always knew about MMA and Jiu-Jitsu, but I never really followed it fully, and I never really, investigated trying to train it. And my friend brought me to the club, and I immediately got hooked. At the club, Gary Tonin was the head instructor. So as soon as I started, I was fortunate enough to have high-level training right from the get-go. And once I found the club, I immediately joined his gym, started training every day. And then, I never looked back. I started training every day for about maybe 6 months. And then Gordon was like, hey, would you be interested in doing this as a profession? Like, are you trying to do this seriously? And to be honest, I didn't even know that was possible. I genuinely just loved to train. I just wanted to learn as much as I could about this sport. I had no idea that I could try to pursue this as a profession or take it seriously. And then I saw, Gary and Gordon, or at the time it was just Gary climbing the ranks. He had already been a world champion, but he was, competing in ADCC. He was fighting like Rousimar Palhares and stuff like that on these big cards. And it really got me thinking like, hey man, it might be a better lifestyle to try to pursue something that I genuinely love rather than working really hard just for a paycheck for somebody else's company. So I really switched my life around when I started finding jiu-jitsu and started just focusing on what I love to do and then trying to monetize that rather than looking for the money and then, sacrificing my time for it.
Yeah, man. I love it, dude. I love that you had the wherewithal to kind of say, let me follow my heart here and take that leap. But also, dude, how fortunate, like the tutelage and the mentorship to fall under the two best in the world, arguably, like Gordon and Gary. That's amazing. Let me ask this real quick. Like, I guess you're again, I don't know you personally, right? So I know, like, I just think the way people compete is an extension of the personality. I think you see a lot of their soul and then they compete. And dude, you're dynamic, man. Like, I'm not going to say you're cocky, but you're confident. You're aggressive when you need to be. Like, your style fits in perfect with like Gary and Gordon. So is that, I guess where the question is that just who you are and you just found a home with these guys? Or like, was that sort of like cultivated and you kind of learned, because of them?
So at the end of the day, this still is a martial art, right? So on our team, we all learn the same exact movements and exact sequences. However, where we choose to implement those sequences are very different, right? Mm-hmm. So our personality definitely shows through our competing, right? Our competitions. Because at the end, right, like I said before, it is still a martial art, and it is still there's still art to it. And I definitely believe. I mean, you could ask Gary. I'm definitely more on the more confident / cocky side ever since I was a white belt, to be honest, even when I was a white belt, I was thinking like I could become world class and I can achieve great things even when I didn't really know anything. It's kind of funny now, but before I even started jiu-jitsu, I thought I was a great fighter. So I thought I was like a better fighter before I started jiu-jitsu than how I look at myself now.
Right.
It's pretty funny.
Right.
But yeah, I'm definitely not overly, so I'm definitely confident in my skills, but I still have some reserves in me. So you do see, I do have more of a Gary-esque style jiu-jitsu where like, you see some scrambles, you see some dynamic movement, but I feel like I don't take as many risks as somebody like Gary does. Like Gary's willing to try anything and everything and put on this great show and not really, care. Whereas I feel like I'm a little bit more conservative than he is. And that definitely shows in our personalities and in our jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, for sure. One thing, again, over just watching your game and kind of watching it, I don't want to say develop because your game's just awesome. So it's more like I discover new things you can do as I watch. But that being said, one thing I've really noticed is that your cardio is amazing and you go the distance a lot of time. But not a lot of time, but oftentimes I've seen that in matches and like your cardio is awesome. And I think that's a very underrated part of jiu-jitsu and people's games we kind of neglect to talk about. Are you doing anything special to train around that? Like or is this a gift from God? Like, what is this?
So when it comes to cardio, so I definitely believe, I have a good gas tank. Well, first, me and Gary are pretty much the only guys on the team that do MMA before jiu-jitsu. So while everybody comes in, around 11 a.m. or maybe 12 p.m. For jiu-jitsu, we're there at the gym 9:30 a.m. Doing MMA. So we have a full MMA session before jiu-jitsu. So we have our MMA session plus sparring, and then we're on to our jiu-jitsu. So I definitely think that helps. So pretty much all year round, I'll always be in shape because we never really take days off.
Right.
However, that being said, the biggest factor for the cardio is actually our philosophy of being efficient. So when you see me like in my Who's Number One match, you saw me come out very slow. The biggest thing that I don't want to happen in my matches is that I come out super aggressive and then 5-10 minutes in, I have nothing in the gas tank. And now you just feel like you're drowning. So in my Who's Number One match, you saw my opponent, Lewis, come out super strong. He took me down, started really putting on the pressure. And my main thing was there's no way in hell he's going to be able to keep this pace up. I spoke to Gordon before the Who's Number One match, and he was telling me you should start at 20 to 25% in that match for the first 5 minutes. So although it looked like I was losing, don't get me wrong, on the scoreboard I was losing, but tactically I was winning.
Yeah.
So I didn't use any of my energy. I just kept inside position. I was super efficient with my movements.
Right.
And as I started to feel my opponent fade, that's when you saw me start to increase my pacing. So in my matches, like we can say Andrew Tackett, in that 50-minute match, again, everything was just about pacing. I didn't want to exhaust myself because I was willing to go as long as it took for me to get the submission. Unfortunately, it was a 50-minute match. They started calling for points, so then I ended up losing on a golden score rule. But I was ready to go hours if need be. I was just thinking, I was like, hey, Gordon had a 90-minute match with Keenan, man, I could do that as long as I keep my pacing. As long in no time limit submission only matches, as long as you don't get tired, you'll essentially win, especially on our team, because I genuinely believe that we have the greatest submission defense.
Right. Your defense is impeccable. Right. You said it. And exactly. And sorry to interrupt, but like keeping the inside control on your feet and all, like referring to that match, I remember watching it and just my layman's mind, watching it. I never thought you were behind. I never, because you were maintaining the right positions to kind of sit and wait for your move. Like it was very Gordon-esque, actually. It was very similar. So that's so interesting to hear you explain it that way. That's fascinating. But yeah, to your point, submission defense. I mean, you guys just work on those sort of points and those positions to, I guess that's part of the overall strategy of the game, I imagine.
Well, it's kind of a byproduct. So John's whole philosophy of jiu-jitsu is a submission-oriented style of jiu-jitsu. So the whole goal is attacking submissions. And since our opponents, or since our training partners, are attacking submissions over and over and over again, it's a byproduct that our submission defense becomes great, So that's really where the confidence in submission defense comes from. Because when you have somebody like Gordon, Gary, Nikki, when they're attacking you with the greatest submissions in the world, you're not really afraid of anybody else's submissions because you've already seen the best of the best submissions.
Sure.
So that's really where I get the confidence from my submission defense. I don't really believe in having, this. You hear sometimes people saying, oh, you got to believe, or you just got to be more confident. I don't really believe in arbitrarily just saying, you got to be confident. I believe the confidence comes from, constant trial and error in the training room. Sure. So that constant experimentation, constant progress of your work in the training room, that's really where the confidence will stem from. And we're such a submission oriented game, is like we see hundreds of thousands of submissions all the time. So that's really where it stems from.
So transitioning just a little. So what was the experience like just moving to Puerto Rico with the team, reestablishing your life and training regimen, all of those things also? What's that been like?
It's definitely been some ups and downs. So just to preface this, my schedule in Jersey was super difficult. Now, I was willing to do it. I believe everybody that knows me understands that there's no amount of work that I won't be willing to do. Like, I'll pretty much always that's something that I really hold dear to my heart, that I don't think I was taught. Rather, like, this is just something ingrained in me, that I'm always willing to work as hard as I can to pursue or to achieve whatever dream I have. But in Jersey, we'd have to be up, we were waking up at like 5:36 a.m. to go train. We had to drive like an hour and a half to the city to train. Then we would do jiu-jitsu, we would do MMA in between. Then we have a second jiu-jitsu session. Sometimes I'd have to do a second MMA session after jiu-jitsu. Then we'd go back to Jersey, drive an hour and a half. Then I'd have to teach privates, teach class. We would do another training session. We get home at like 11:30 just to do it again. So although, I wasn't complaining about the lifestyle. This is the lifestyle I chose, right? I chose to go to all those sessions. Sure. I chose to do those things. But being in Puerto Rico, where I don't have to do those things, it is a big burden that's lifted off of my shoulders, rather, right? So I don't have to go back to, my gym or Gary's gym and teach class. I don't have to do this hour and a half commute. So in that sense, I'm really grateful that we moved to Puerto Rico. To be honest, anything that stops me from doing that is a big burden off my shoulders, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. So other than that, I guess just maybe a slight disconnect from the family, those natural things, maybe just starting new roots, foundation. But as a professional athlete, what an amazing burden to be able to concentrate on, recovery and training. That's great.
Exactly. Yeah. So from the athlete's perspective, it is one of the greatest things to happen, or at least for me, because, I had so much else, like so many other things going on. But from, the lifestyle perspective, there are some downsides to it. Like, I moved away from my family, moved away from my friends. I had opened up a business that I had to move away from. So in that sense, it's definitely, there's definitely a trade-off that I had to do.
Sure.
When it comes to everyday life, everyday life in Puerto Rico is a little bit of a struggle. Sometimes we have blackouts, sometimes we have water outages, and stuff like that. Infrastructure is not as great. Mm-hmm. So especially when we come from the East Coast of the US, where everything is super fast paced, we expect, we go into a Starbucks and expect our coffee in less than 5 minutes versus we go into a Starbucks on the island, you can be there for 15, 20 minutes, and that's just a normal thing, and everybody's okay with that. Sometimes that can get a bit annoying dealing with other businesses. So there's definitely a trade-off that we had to do.
Yeah, it's definitely a different change of pace. I totally understand that. So just as a quick aside, my wife is Costa Rican, and we go visit her family, at least once a year. And there's this awesome jujitsu school and nonprofit out there, and they donate to these local kids. Like they help feed families every year. It's just this amazing school. And so I'll go train there like while we're in town and stuff, but it's the same thing. It's not as easy as you think. It's like a road may be out, and you could get stuck on one side or the other. So I get it totally. It feels, but it's the trade-off. It's these slight sacrifices for that kind of different life and that freedom,
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I think it's really cool that your group, you guys made the trip, you made the homage, you did it together, and you all bet on yourself. I mean, I think it's really neat, and it's going to be very interesting to see over the next 2-3 years what's going to happen, what's really going to happen, because you guys are already, like, in my opinion, your team is so dominating. You're all very successful in your own right. But now under these circumstances and set of elements, it's going to be really cool to see how these games expand.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with you. If you look at our team, I mean, we're still, relative to everyone else, we're still a young team, I have less than 6 years experience. Nikki has less than 7 years experience. Ethan, less than 8. If you're talking Gordon, I think he might be at 12 years now. So when it comes experience wise, I mean, we're still the youngest team. So even 2-3 years, you'll see big changes. But if you put into perspective on the time that our competitors or our opponents are training, I mean, you put us at 5-10 years, what happens? That's going to be, a scary looking team.
I love it. Yeah, man.
Yeah. John, but John, like, always has this thinking. He was like, people overestimate what they can achieve in, 1 to 5 years, but they highly underestimate what they can achieve in 5 to 10. So, I mean, we're all very long-term thinkers. Like, that's why this slow progression, we train every single day, and we don't expect the results right away, but give us enough time and it'll be just insane how much progression we can make.
I really hope to benefit to meet him or to speak with John Danaher one day. I mean, the way that guy thinks, it's certain things that man says seem so logical to me, and then they're mind blowing. It's like one or the other. Like, man, it's just, he's a fascinating guy, the way his mind works. And so let me ask this. I know we're kind of running on time, but two definite more questions for you. So you mentioned this a couple of times, but is the ultimate goal for you to pursue an MMA career as well?
So, yes, the ultimate goal is to pursue MMA. So I have goals of, fighting and competing at the highest levels in MMA, whether it be, the biggest organization, UFC or ONE FC. I definitely have aspirations of achieving those goals. And I think that's a more long-term goal in my competitive career. My short-term goals are how good can I get in jiu-jitsu first? And then, I'll backpack or I'll ride on the back of the momentum from jiu-jitsu onto professional MMA. So right now I'm training MMA every single day. I've been doing that for, a little over 2 years now, along with John. So it's me and Gary that are under John's, watchful eye, training every single day. And when the time comes, I'll be ready to make that transition. But right now, my goal is to get as good as I can in jiu-jitsu prior to going professional. Actually, not even professional, but prior to going to high-level professional fighting, because I definitely I'm at the local professional level right now. Like, I'm going to try to make my professional debut sometime this year, if not early next year.
Cool.
But when we're talking about, world-class fighting, I want to get my jiu-jitsu as good as humanly possible before focusing on that.
Sure. They can't hurt, and you have time on your side. Yeah. So there's no rush in that regard, for sure. And man, what awesome tutelage again under Danaher and Gary. Gary, I love Gary's fights. I love all of his jiu-jitsu and his fights. That guy's awesome, and his stand-up sneaky good too. So it's cool to see, like, how you're going to perform too. I'm going to watch it. I'm 100% in, man. I can't wait.
Thank you.
Yeah. So maybe one more kind of nerdy jujitsu question for you before I let you go too. So other than your own team and coaches, who was maybe an early like inspiration for you? Like who did you go online and watch their game and be like, dang, that's crazy?
So you're saying jujitsu?
Yeah. BJJ. Yeah.
So when I first started learning about jujitsu, the biggest guy on YouTube was Keenan, right?
Yeah.
Keenan Cornelius.
Yeah.
So in my mind, when I first started, I was like, this guy is a god.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, look at all these different things that he's doing. And at the time, I was looking, I didn't know much about Gary when I first started. I was completely ignorant on the sport. I didn't know when I started training jiu-jitsu, for maybe like the first few months, I didn't even know Gary was like a big name.
Wow.
I had no idea.
Your own coach. That's amazing. Have you told him that?
I mean, he knows. Yeah, he knows.
That's awesome.
I just like the sport. So I was just training all the time. And then I wanted to learn more. So then I started going on YouTube, and then I happened to come across, Keenan, who beat Gary before. And I was like, wow, this guy's good. And then I don't know if maybe I was a year in, I think I was still a white belt at the time, but Gordon had faced Keenan. And then Gordon beat Keenan, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. This guy's on my team. He teaches at my school. I know him. Right. So that was a big eye opener. I was like, wow, this guy's great. And honestly, so he was technically on our team, Eddie, right? This is back when Eddie was training. Yeah. But then when I started looking up jiu-jitsu more and being fascinated about John, I came across Eddie, and I didn't meet Eddie at the time, but I started watching his fights, and I was like, this guy's going out and leg locking people, and nobody has any answers to his leg locks. He's so smart. I listened to some podcasts and interviews with him. I was like, this guy's a genius. Yeah. And then the first time I went to Henzo's, actually, I saw Eddie sitting on the mats, and I didn't tell anybody this, but I was like, oh my goodness, I've seen this guy's videos. He's right here, right in front of me. And that was a cool experience for me, because that's like meeting somebody that I was studying right in front of me, and I had access to him. I could talk to him like he's a real person. Yeah. So that was a cool experience.
Man, what a cool story, man. Thank you for sharing that. What an awesome story, man.
Yeah,
it's fascinating too, because again, when you joined, like you said, it was like leg lock game was exploding, and it was such an exciting time. It's funny as you say that too, because I would consider you such a no-gi specialist that it's so funny to think you were attracted to like gi stuff. Maybe Keenan, was it gi's Keenan stuff, lapel stuff? Or
no,
was it
actually it wasn't even his gi stuff. I was always a true no-gi guy from the get-go. Yeah. I had seen I think it was an IBJJF match with Gary, and then an organization called Five Grappling, which was also no-gi with Gary. So they were both no-gi. I was always into no-gi. I watched a little bit of gi, but it didn't excite me like no-gi. There was just so much movement, so many weird different entanglements and sequences and scrambles, and that's really what caught my eye. I never really took a vested interest in gi.
Yeah, I get it. I understand totally. And I had a wrestling background growing up, so no-gi to me was just so much more dynamic. It just attracted me immediately. I understand that for sure. Well, man, we've come up on time. I appreciate this so much. I lied. Actually, one more final question. Yeah. Where can people reach you if they want to inquire about, privates, anything like that?
Yeah. So you guys can always reach out to me on my Instagram, Bjjdamien. Damien is Damien. So Bjjdamien, that's, the thing that I'm most on. You can always contact my gym, info@allinbjj.com. So I also manage the back end of my gym. So I'm always answering those emails, always answering my Instagram.
Awesome. Yeah, great. Thank you. Again, this is John Gibson, Damien Anderson. Thank you so much again for joining me.
Of course. Thank you for having me, brother.
My pleasure.